Hello, welcome to another episode of Stories of World War II Veterans. My name is Kayleen Reusser, and each week I will read you a story from a book I have written after interviewing 260 World War II veterans. Today's story comes from Book 4 in my World War II Legacies series. It's called We Defended Freedom: Adventures of World War II Veterans. Thanks to all the veterans watching for your service. We would not be free without you. At Omaha Beach, chaos reigned. Staff Sergeant Vernon Affolder assisted in loading fallen soldiers into Allied landing crafts. As clerk to an Army surgeon, Affolder wore a red band on his arm and Red Cross on his helmet. Yet the focus of his work that time in June of 1944 was solely administrative. He had not been trained in first aid, nor had he been issued a gun. So when a shell blew off the leg of a nearby soldier, Affolder was unable to help. The 21-year-old watched helplessly as others cried out in pain from injuries. For years, Affolder would have dreadful flashbacks of that time. Vernon Affolder had been born in Van Wert, Ohio. He moved with his family to Decatur, Indiana, where he graduated from high school in 1937. Affolder worked at a hardware store until 1941, when he received a draft notice from the United States Army. Assigned to the infantry, Affolder completed basic training at Camp Shelby in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. He and thousands of other new recruits learned to shoot and hike through miles of poison ivy infested weeds, carrying heavy packs. At Camp Beauregard in Pineville, Louisiana, Affolder's commanding officer discovered he had taken a typing class in high school. This was considered a valuable skill, and Affolder was transferred to the surgeon's office as a supply clerk. Within months, Affolder and thousands of other American soldiers had boarded the Queen Elizabeth for Europe. The former luxury liner had been converted to a troop ship. It was one of the fastest vessels in the world and carried depth bombs to be released at the sight of German submarines. In Bristol, England, Affolder worked at 5th Corps headquarters. His commander was in charge of all field hospitals and aid stations. At 0630 hours on June 6 of 1944, more than 150,000 soldiers, American, Canadian, and British, began dropping from landing crafts into the waters of northwest France. The intent was for troops to storm 5 beaches along the Normandy coast. They were code-named Utah and Omaha, and those were the American beaches; Gold and Sword, those were British; and Juno, which was Canadian. After the invasion, the Allies' plans were to establish a beachhead, then force the Germans to retreat through France into Germany, not stopping until reaching the capital of Berlin, which was Nazi headquarters. The military plan at Normandy was called Operation Overlord, otherwise known as D-Day. Adolf Hitler and his Nazi troops had prepared for an Allied invasion along the Atlantic coast. Unable to determine time and location, the Germans remained alert inside reinforced gun emplacements. Wooden logs placed upright along the French coast were thought to cause casualties to paratroopers, but when the time came, their effect was actually minimal. Month after month the Germans waited. On the fateful day when hundreds of Allied ships filled with troops were spotted off the coast, shells began firing from the emplacements, traveling as far as 12 miles. The success of the battle at Normandy secured a foothold for the Americans, as they had hoped. As they continued to push the Germans into a retreat, Affolder rejoined his surgeon's outfit. On one occasion he met Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, General Dwight D. Eisenhower. "He was a wonderful guy," said Affolder. "He talked to us about our work at the invasion." On December 16, 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, Affolder narrowly avoided becoming a casualty at what would become known as the Malmedy Massacre. Affolder's unit had pulled out of Malmedy, Belgium, less than 24 hours before a German combat unit approached the area. The Germans captured 84 American soldiers outside of the town. In direct violation of the rules of the Geneva Convention for prisoners of war, the Germans lined the Americans up and shot them, leaving their bloodied bodies strewn in the snow-covered field. One soldier, pretending to be dead, escaped to a nearby town. When news of the massacre spread, the Allies were filled with vengeance. Affolder had a slightly different reaction. "That was the scariest part of the war for me," he said, "to think we missed death by one day." In April 1945, Affolder witnessed the atrocities of deaths at the Killing Center, formerly referred to as a concentration camp, at Buchenwald, Germany. The camp had recently been liberated and survivors taken away to receive medical help. Thousands of slain bodies lay on the ground, victims of abuse and neglect by Nazi guards. We saw the butcher block where dentists had removed gold from prisoners' teeth to melt it for the war effort, said Affolder. In May of 1945, the Germans surrendered. In September, the Japanese followed with an official, unconditional surrender ceremony in Tokyo Bay. The war was over. Due to the number of battles he had fought and length of time of service, Vernon Affolder was one of the first to be discharged. He and other American soldiers were flown back to the United States in C-47 planes. At home in Decatur, Indiana, Affolder established a career of selling life insurance. He and his wife Phyllis met in 1941 while he was on furlough, and they married after the war. For his contribution as a soldier, Vernon Affolder was issued a Bronze Star for bravery and acts of meritorious service, the fourth highest combat award of the United States Armed Forces. Thanks for listening to another story from Stories of World War II Veterans. I read today from We Defended Freedom, Adventures of World War II Veterans. My name is Kayleen Reusser, and each week I share one of these stories as part of my effort to support our amazing military. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe and tell others. I'll see you next week.